Oh, g'day. Now, in a previous video, we spoke about life as we know it being a visualization of thoughts. We are one mind with an infinite number of personalities, all expressing ourselves into a dream. Our innate ability is to visualize our thoughts into a dream state. That's the closest thing we'll ever get to a reality, actually. We're just a mind, an essence that thinks and visualizes its thoughts into dream states. And within those dream states, the personalities interact with that environment within the dream. Now, thought is a response to or an opinion of an environment, which is circumstantial surroundings or conditions. And as we spoke before, those circumstantial surroundings or conditions could be simply a state of mind. How we think, how aware we are of what we are. So this life, as the dream of mind, we spoke how it comes about. Now, we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. Geometrical thought harmonics is what I have labelled as the language of thought, the language of mind. Atoms form in geometrical patterns. Triangles, squares, pentagons, heptagons. Language of creation. As I spoke before, everything within life, or within the dream, is symbolic of a way of thinking, a state of mind, visualized thoughts. Okay, so geometrical thought harmonics. We start off with the basics. Now, simple geometry. Simple geometry is the language of creation. That's what it is. It has symbolically manifested itself into the dream as a response to those questions that the mind asked. What am I? How do I come about? Did something create me? What's my purpose? All of that stuff is playing out in this dream, this shared dream within a shared mind. All of us personalities representing separate entities, separations within that mind, partitions within that mind, personalities wishing for privacy within a shared mind or dream, forming personal memories within that one mind, partitions, separations. Okay, as we spoke before, it's caused a whole lot of crap. Everything within this dream that we call life represents the state of our own mind. All the questions that we're asking, an infinite number of possible answers being expressed into the dream state. Possible scenarios. This is how it could have been. Oh, this is how we might have come about. This might be our purpose. That might be our purpose. All reflecting into this dream state. It's amazing. Now, getting to the basics of geometry. You have a point and you have lines. So a point in geometry represents a point of view in the mind. Thought, a response to or an opinion of an environment. So that point represents thought. Now, designs of thought manifest in geometry. Well, let's put it this way. You have one point, thought. A line between 2 points is a line of thought, the direction the thought takes. an angle between 3 points. Now you say, someone says, oh, what's his angle? What's his intention? What's his or her agenda? So an angle represents intention or agenda within the mind, within the language of creation. Intention, agenda. So the first polygon, a polygon is simply a plane or facet, a two-dimensional design of thought. It can be three, like a triangle, a square, a pentagon, a hexagon. They're all polygons. Represent designs of thought with intention. They are agendas. So we have an equilateral triangle of 3 points, 3 lines of thought, 3 angles, but they're all the same. They're all the same angles, same intention. So one design of thought with one intention, one agenda. The equilateral triangle represents imagination, which has a creative intention or agenda. It's creative thought. Then we have a square, 4 points, 4 lines of thought, 4 angles, but all again the same. Same intention or agenda. Square represents intellect. It is receptive and constructive. It has a receptive and constructive intention or agenda. It takes on board and builds upon concepts. It accumulates. So memory is formed by intellect. It accumulates thoughts. Takes on board and builds upon concepts. Then we have a pentagon. 5 points, 5 lines of thought, 5 angles, again all the same, one intention, one agenda. The pentagon represents motive. Motive has a personal intention or agenda. Motive is personal agenda. Now, motive represents personal thought or consciousness. Consciousness is personal thought. If you're conscious, you're having personal thoughts. Without personal thought, you're unconscious. No personal input. Okay, so far we have imagination, we have intellect, and we have consciousness. It's the mind evolving. Imagination, creative, creation, intellect, receptive and constructive, accumulates, forms memory. Motive, personal thought or consciousness. Okay, now the next one is a product of imagination. It's the hexagon. The hexagon, if you take 2 equilateral triangles overlapped equally to form 6 equal-sided and 6 points or 6 equal sides, again, same angle, same agenda, same intention. The hexagon. Now, those overlapping equilateral triangles of creative thought or imagination. When we have 2 polygons overlapping, it represents interaction. Now, through interaction, we have experience. So a hexagon is a product of experience-based creative thought or experience-based imagination. It's experiential. A product of experiential creative thought, experiential creativity, experiential imagination. Forms love. Love. Experience-based imagination, experience-based creativity, interactive creativity, Now, love, in essence, is unconditional acceptance. Unconditional acceptance. A lot of people don't really understand what that means, because when most people use the term love, it most certainly doesn't mean that I unconditionally accept you, because we don't really understand. We really don't understand a lot of the terms. We don't understand ourselves. Now, we have dictionaries with all these different definitions within those dictionaries, but quite often we have contradictive definitions of the same term. And like I said, that's because we don't fully understand who we are and what our mind is, all the functions of our mind, all the designs of thought. So we've attempted to explain what we already know, partial awareness. But quite often those definitions are all over the place in dictionaries. So, pardon me, unconditional acceptance. Now, unconditional or love, hexagon, represents unconditional acceptance. Unconditional acceptance creates programs and impulses. Now, if we were to say that love was impulsive, we'd probably all agree. But if I said that love creates programs and reflex responses, most of us would scratch our heads. So, doesn't sound right. But that's how it is. Unconditional acceptance. You bypass the word love. Unconditional acceptance creates programs. Program thought through unconditional acceptance. Reflex responses are programs. Impulses are programs. Okay, so love is reflex responsive and impulsive. Okay, unconditional acceptance. Then we have a 7-pointed design, or 7 lines of thought. Heptagon. Now, a heptagon represents perception. Perception, how we perceive something. Perception is the way we see things. It's a form of understanding. The way we see something. Form of understanding. From perception, we get hindsight, insight, and foresight. They're all forms of perception. Okay. Then we have an octagon, 8 points, 8 equal sides, again, same intention, same agenda. Now, if those polygons weren't regular polygons, which means the angles weren't the same, the length of the lines weren't the same, it would have a different concept because it would have more than one intention or more than one agenda. It would be irregular. Now, there's another word for that. Unorthodox. But we're talking about regular polygons within the mind. So we have an octagon that's created by 2 overlapping squares of intellect to create the 8 points. 2 overlapping squares of intellect. Again, interactive and experiential. Now, the octagon represents morality. It's a product of experience-based intelligence. Experience-based intelligence forms morality. Intellect takes on board and builds upon concepts. So experiential intelligence takes on board and builds upon experiences. Morality takes on board and builds upon experiences, or builds upon what we have experienced. Receptive and constructive takes on board and builds upon concepts. Okay, then we have a nonagon, which has 9 points, 9 equal sides, same intention, same agenda. A nonagon is 3 equilateral triangles overlapping to form the 9 points. 3 3 is 9. It represents forgiveness, creative mediation. It's mediative imagination or mediative creativity, forgiveness, creative mediation. Then we have a decagon, 10 points, 10 equal sides, same intention, same agenda. The decagon is a product of 2 overlapping pentagons of motive, personal thought or consciousness. Okay. Interactive or experience-based consciousness. The decagon represents belief. Now, belief is a declaration of personal preference or choice. A declaration of personal preference or choice, it's preferentiality. A product of, so belief is a product of experience-based consciousness. That's, we form beliefs from experience, from what we have experienced in the conscious state. Okay. Now, we're not going to give all of these designs. We'll go to a few. We have 11-pointed design, a hen decagon. Again, regular, so same intention, same agenda. It represents reflection, to reflect upon something, to concentrate on something, to ponder, to consider. That's reflection. Then we have a 12-pointed design. Again, 12 equal sides, equal angles. But it's a product of 4 overlapping equilateral triangles of creative thought or imagination, 3 overlapping squares of intellect, 2 overlapping hexagons of love or unconditional acceptance, program thought, reflex responsive or impulsive thought. Okay, so the 12-pointed design represents synchronicity. Synchronicity or coordination. That's what synchronicity is. It's coordinative. It's experiential creative thought, experiential intelligence, and experiential love. But if you put a point in the center of the hexagon, create a center point hexagon, and you connect the outside points of the hexagon to that center point, it creates 6 equilateral triangles focused inwards to a center point. Now we're getting ahead. I'll get ahead of myself a little bit here. But sense, you know what sense is? Sense. Sense labels, recognizes, and recalls memory. Makes sense? Sense. Common sense, all sort of stuff. But a center point hexagon isn't 3-dimensional. Normally sense, in geometric form, forms of sense are pyramids. All pyramids represent forms of sense within the mind. But the center point hexagon is a form of sense, but it's a planar sense. Sense is focused creative thought or focused imagination. That's what sense is. Focused creative thought. Focused creativity. Now the center point hexagon, all of those equilateral triangles are focused inwards to a center point. So it's focused creative thought. But that point, when you put a point in the center of a polygon, square, whatever, hexagon, it forms an agreement. All of the outside points come together to form an agreement, a central agreement of that trait, that design of thought has an agreement, forms an agreement. So the hexagon, love-based, it's a form of sense, and it's an agreement. So it represents awareness. Awareness. A love-based sense agreement, or a conclusive agreement of focused creative thought or focused imagination. It's impulsive, but it's also a sense. It's a sensory impulse. So awareness is a sensory impulse. Okay. So we get back to the dodecagon, 12 points, 2 overlapping center point hexagons, synchronized awareness, coordination. But it's also creative intelligence or intelligent creativity, synchronicity, receptive and constructive, takes on board and builds upon concepts, but also creative. Okay. Now, we'll skip a few. We'll go to the 14 points. No, we'll go to the 13. Okay, 13 points, 13 lines. That represents reification. 13 points, external points, 13 lines of thought, 13 angles. Reification is to make a concept in the mind real. Reification, to make a concept in the mind real. That's a 13-point design. 14-point is 2 overlapping 7-pointed designs or heptagons. So it's interactive or experiential perception. Experiential perception. Now the 14-point design represents hindsight. Experience-based perception. Perception of experience. Hindsight. Perception of experience. How we see something. Looking back at what we have experienced. Makes sense to me. Okay, so then we go to the 16-point design, which is 2 overlapping octagons or 4 overlapping squares of intellect. 16-point design. It represents rectification. Now, rectification is correction in essence. It's just simply correction. To rectify, to correct. It's overlapping intelligence, overlapping morality, is experiential morality. Now, through moral experience, or what we have experienced. Now, intellect takes on board and builds upon concepts. Morality takes on board and builds upon experiences. And rectification makes corrections according to what we have experienced, what we have taken on board and built upon through experience. We make corrections. Moral corrections. Rectification. Okay, now we'll go straight to a 20-point design, an icosagon. Now, an icosagon, a 20-point design, product of 5 overlapping squares of intellect, 4 overlapping pentagons of motive, personal thought or consciousness, or 2 overlapping decagons of belief. Okay, so we have intellect, motive, and belief. In essence, the icosagon represents identity. 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 Intelligent motivation, intelligent consciousness, or conscious intelligence. It's a product of belief, takes on board and builds upon beliefs to form an identity. Product of beliefs. Now that's as far as we'll go with those polygons, the planes. They form planes or facets of geometric spheres, or three-dimensional geometric structures. Okay, so they are the basic traits. Basic traits. Some of them are progressive traits or interactive, experiential traits. Alright, now, are we getting too complicated for everybody? Are your eyes glazed over? You're going into brain death? Hopefully not. I've only given the basics. It's just to understand geometry in relation to designs of thought. It's a language of creation. That's how atoms form. Everything, and atoms are just energy. You know, everything's just energy. And thought is energy. So all of that stuff is just designs of thought. Energy by design. And that's what it is. That's what geometry represents. Through geometry, helps us to navigate, calculate, and to construct. It's a language. It's a language. It helps us to understand the mind, to navigate the mind, to understand all of the different designs of thought within the mind. It manifested itself into the dream state as a form of guidance to help us to understand ourselves, to understand how mind develops, evolves, how our thought forms develop and evolve. It fascinates me. All that stuff within this dream state symbolizes something. Okay, now as I said before, pyramids, all pyramids represent forms of sense. They are symbolic forms of sense that are manifested into the dream state. Forms of sense. You have a tetrahedron pyramid, which has all equilateral triangle sides, 4 points, 4 facets, all the same facets, all the same angles. It represents common sense. A common sense is unbiased. By unbiased, we mean that there are no other different facets, like a square-based pyramid has equilateral triangle faces forming an apex, but the base is a square of intellect. So the tetrahedron pyramid represents common sense, unbiased sense. But we just mentioned the square-based pyramid. The square-based pyramid is receptive and constructive. It's focused creative thought, but it's receptive and constructive. It represents attitude. Now, attitude is the position a body takes in relation to an environment. The position a body takes in relation to an environment, that's attitude. And we have all this different definitions of attitude, but it is the position a body takes in relation to an environment. If you have a car going up a hill, the angle of that car is its attitude. Square-based pyramid, Egyptian pyramids, square-based pyramids, forms of attitude, receptive and constructive, takes on board and builds upon concepts. receptive and constructive, a form of sense, attitude. Then we have a pentagon-based pyramid. Pentagon-based pyramid, the pentagon represents motive, personal thought or consciousness, represents desire or a wish. Okay, desire is a wish. It's a motive-based sense. Desire is a motive-based sense. A motive-based, focused creative thought. Motive-based, focused creativity is desire. It's a wish. Motive-based. Wishes are motive-based. Okay. And we already spoke about the center point hexagon of awareness. And they're pretty much the basic forms of sense, actually, within the mind, at least. But awareness is a planar sense. So as the other forms of sense are three-dimensional, and they can form geometric spheres, or they can be directed outwards or inwards within that sphere. But a center point hexagon is a planar sense. Now it can be an external facet of a geometric sphere or an internal facet of a geometric sphere. It can be emotional awareness, which will be a center dissecting center point hexagon. It divides a sphere into halves, forms equators. All other planes within a geometric sphere, other than center dissecting and other than external facets, are mental planes. So awareness can be emotional, it can be mental awareness, and it can be physical awareness. Okay, emotional awareness, mental awareness, and physical awareness. Now, any other forms of sense, a heptagon, if you try and create a pyramid from a heptagon or a seven-pointed design, it doesn't work with equilateral triangle facets. It doesn't work. But if you connect every second point, draw a line between every second point, and then create equilateral triangles to an apex, keep connecting every second point around that, creates a heptagram. Now, all gramic forms are, what would you say, they're like messages, they're interpretations. So a gram is like it's documents, records, interprets. It's an interpretation of that particular trait. So you have you can have pentagrams, you can have hexagrams, octograms, all that sort of stuff. They're all interpretations of that particular trait. So a pentagram will be an interpretation of consciousness, an interpretation of motive, personal thought, or consciousness, a motive interpretation. Interpretation of a motive. A hexagram is the two overlapping equilateral triangles that produce the hexagon of love. So that forms a hexagram. Two overlapping equilateral triangles. Yeah. But a true gramic form connects all the points of a polygon internally in one continuous line connection. So you go from one point to the next point, to the next point, to the next point, keeps going around until it stops. And it creates that gram, that pentagram, hexagram. But see, the hexagram, it doesn't do that. It creates two separate equilateral triangles. If you went from one point to the next and kept going, it'd just go around and around that one triangle. So the hexagram is different to the other gramic forms. Pentagram, interpretation of motive. But the hexagram, in essence, interpretive, but not necessarily. It's the hexagram is interactive. It's experiential. The other gramic forms are interpretive, but the hexagram is interactive. It's experiential. Okay, so all of those designs of thought over and above the hexagon, like I said, you have to create gramic forms, and then those lines, the lines of that gramic form, then go up in equilateral triangles to create an apex. They form mental sense. Mental sense. An interpretive base. It's a sensory interpretation. It's a sensory interpretation. Okay. Let me see. Now, all prisms. A cube is a prism, but you can get a whole lot of different prismatic forms. But all prisms in the mind, in the language of creation, represent forms of logic. Forms of logic. Library of growing intelligent concepts. Logic forms memory, an accumulation and categorization of thoughts. So all square-sided prisms, but a cube has all square sides, the same as the tetrahedron pyramid had all equilateral triangle sides. So the cube, in essence, is unbiased. It's an unbiased form of logic. However, the cube is a product of two tetrahedron pyramids, and the edges of the tetrahedron pyramids form the diagonals of the square sides of the cube. Tetrahedron pyramid represents common sense. Common sense. Those edges are forming intellect agreements formed by common sense. So the cube is formed by two tetrahedron pyramids of common sense. Common logic is what the cube represents. So the common logic is a product of common sense agreements. Common sense agreements form common logic. All other forms of logic are polarized. Now, polarized means that it has all square sides, but the top and bottom facets of the prism are different to the square sides. So you can have equilateral triangle top and bottom poles with square sides. That represents creative logic. Equilateral triangle represents creativity or imagination, creative thought or imagination. So it's creative polarized logic. Creative logic. Memory. It's a memory of creativity. Memory of imagination. Creative memory. It's creative memory. Creative logic, creative memory. Now we get You can have motive logic. Motive logic, polarized, top and bottom planes are pentagons of motive, personal thought or consciousness, with external square planes around the sides. Motive logic. Now motive logic is personal logic, or personal memory, or conscious memory. So a pentagon polarized prism, pentagon prism, represents conscious or personal memory. Conscious or personal memory. Then we can have awareness logic. Awareness logic has a center point hexagon top and bottom with the square sides surrounding it to form a hexagon with a center point. All of the top, as in the hexagon, represents a love-based sense agreement. However, with a prism with two center point hexagons, top and bottom, awareness, top and bottom, awareness polarized logic, it ends up being formed by 6 creative logic structures. As in the center point hexagon, 6 equilateral triangles, center point hexagon, top and bottom. So those equilateral triangles are the polar facets of creative logic, and they form at the center the agreement point of awareness, love-based sense agreement. Well, this becomes a love-based creative logic agreement. Awareness logic, a love-based creative logic agreement. Okay, impulsive logic, sensory impulse. Okay, so then we go to, you can go as long as you like, I suppose, all different types of logic. You can have perceptive logic, you can have moral logic, you can have belief logic, but belief logic can be a product of 2 motive logic structures. Can be. But you can get belief logic. If you put a center point, belief logic has polar decagon planes and then square sides. If you put a center point in the middle of those decagons, what it creates is, if you go to the bottom plane of that polar structure, the decagon, and create 2 overlapping pentagons, then you use those 2 overlapping pentagons as the basis of pentagon-based pyramids of desire or wishes. You connect those bases up to that center point of the top decagon, center point decagon plane. So it creates interactive or experiential desire. So belief logic is a product of interactive or experience-based desire. Agreements of experiential desire. So belief logic is an agreement of experiential desire formed by sense. Now, getting back to the logic states. Logic, library of growing intelligent concepts. A mind is a logical construct. Now, what categorizes that logic state? An accumulation and categorization of thoughts. But what categorizes that logic state? Sense categorizes logic states. So it's categorized by sense. Sense labels, recognizes and recalls memory. It labels memory. It categorizes memory. Common sense categorizes common logic. Desire categorises belief logic. All these different forms of sense. Okay, now, like I said, if your brain was fried before, it is doubly fried now, and I apologise if that's the case. Just trying to explain geometry as that creative language, forming logic, sense, mind states, behaviours, traits. So, where will we go from here? Go back to the cube. Now, as we said, a cube of common logic is formed by two tetrahedron pyramids of common sense. It's a common sense agreement. Now, the edges of the tetrahedron pyramids form the diagonals of the square facets of the cube. If you put a point where those diagonals meet at the centre of the squares of intellect, it creates 6 points, the 6 points of an octahedron. Now, an octahedron, if you took two square-based pyramids and connected them at their bases, it forms an octahedron. But once you connect them to their bases, it actually forms 6. Each of the points of that octahedron becomes a pyramid point with a square base. But two square-based pyramids share the one base. So it has 3 squares, emotional squares of intellect, within that octahedron. And those emotional squares of intellect form apexes. Now, what those 3 squares, emotional squares of intellect, represent is feeling. Feeling is an expression of emotional intelligence, an expression of what has been suggestively taken on board and built upon. That's what feeling is, an expression of what has been suggestively taken on board and built upon. So the cube, created by common sense agreements, but the agreement formed by common sense, is the octahedron of nature, or attitudinal behaviour, an attitudinal expression of feeling. Square-based pyramid, attitude, the position a body takes in relation to an environment. So the octahedron of nature, the position a body takes in relation to feeling. The position a body takes in relation to how it feels about the self, about the environment, or about the experiences it has within an environment. Nature, attitudinal behaviour. The position a body takes in relation to how it feels about the self, about the environment, and about the experiences it has within the environment. Nature, attitudinal behaviour. An attitudinal expression of feeling. An attitudinal expression of emotional intelligence. Suggestive intelligence. Now you have all different types of feeling. The attitudinal feeling, octahedron, represents nature. But you can also have awareness-based feeling. It has an emotional plane, centre point hexagon plane, that forms an equator. And then you have 3 squares of intellect connecting to the top and bottom points of a sort of double terminating pyramid, sort of. So it's awareness-based feeling. Feeling suggests behaviour. So awareness-based behaviour is respect. Respect is awareness-based behaviour. An awareness-based expression of emotional intelligence. An awareness-based expression of emotional intelligence. Awareness is sensory as well. So it's a sensory expression of emotional intelligence. Okay, so you have attitudinal behavior, nature, awareness-based behavior, respect. Then you can have belief-based behavior. Belief is a declaration of personal preference or choice. Belief-based behavior. A belief-based expression of emotional intelligence. Belief-based behavior is trust. Trust is belief-based behavior. Okay. We can have moral-based behavior. But an octagon base with top and bottom apexes, double terminating, but an octagon is a product of two squares of intellect. So if you take those two squares as the bases of attitude, it becomes virtue, moral-based feeling, or moral-based attitudinal behavior. Moral-based attitudinal behavior is virtue. Moral-based attitudinal behavior. Product of two interactive or overlapping octahedrons of nature. Moral-based nature. Virtue. Okay. I don't think we need to go any further with that. Let me see. I think we'll leave it at that. Like I said, it's probably most of you have probably turned it off already. But anyone who's really interested in the language of mind, the language of creation, why atoms form in geometric patterns, why all these geometric structures and spheres exist, that's why. It's a language of mind. It's a language of thought. It is the mind. The mind calculates, navigates, constructs. Logical construct, suggested by feeling. Mind states, logical constructs, suggested by feeling. In essence, all logic is behavioral logic. All logic states, all mind states are behavioral memory of behavior. That's what a mindset is. A mind state is memory of behavior. Behavioral logic, memory of behavior. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Like I said, it's complicated, but it's worthwhile trying to understand it, because when you get further into the language of mind, it's amazing. You have all of these geometric structures that represent intuition, instinct, compassion, and then you disassemble or you analyze all of the internal structures of those geometric spheres, the planes, external planes, internal planes, emotional, mental, and physical planes. Then it helps you to understand what those structures, or what that intuition, what creates intuition, what are its functions, by analyzing all of the geometric patterns within that structure. You can define accurately what intuition is, rather than looking into a dictionary and getting all sorts of contradictive interpretations. You can get an accurate definition of those states of mind: intuition, instinct, compassion. All of those. Will is an expression of desire. Faith is trust-based will. It's a trust-based expression of desire. Faith. like I said, all of those things, they really deserve faith, especially, and intuition and instinct. Instinct is a virtual brain. It forms logic states within it that create a virtual brain mind. So all of those really need to be focused on individually to give a deeper understanding of each of those things. And I can make videos to do that, to give a proper definition of intuitive nature, of instinct. Okay, we'll leave it at that. And like I said, I hope somebody got something from it and you're not all too confused. I'll get back to you with other videos. Hopefully not all complicated ones. Thank you.